Hey, Deliberate Leaders. I am Allison Dunn, your host of the Deliberate Leaders podcast, where we are bringing you interviews and episodes of people who bring expertise in various areas of business. And today's guest is Donald Asher. He is the author and speaker specializing in professional development and higher education. He's been quoted in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Fortune, Money, USA Today, and many other places. His books cover topics like writing resumes and graduate essay admissions essays, launching and relaunching careers, and finding opportunities in any economy, and earning promotions. And I'm just going to add that he also has a specialty in salary negotiations as well. So, Donald, thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Allison, and thanks for putting together such a useful series.
Absolutely, my pleasure. This is such an interesting topic at an interesting point in time because a lot of the work that you do is very career focused. One of the statistics that we have is that more than 10 million adults under the age of 30 are now either unemployed or have been dropped from the labor force currently in the last month. What is your top advice for these folks right now?
Well, my top advice would be not to go home, go into the basement, and start getting really good at Fortnite. So the first thing is that some people are succeeding. The whole issue is to find out what they're doing and do what they're doing. So the biggest advice, don't check out. Checking out will show, not just now, but even in years to come, people will say, what did you do during the pandemic? And if your answer is lame, then you're lame.
I think that is excellent advice. So with 42% of recent layoffs, my understanding is that 42% of the recent layoffs will be permanent in our workforce. So what do you think the implications are going to be for our younger generation?
Well, we know from prior generations that graduated into a recession that their hit is about 15%, and it takes about 15 years for that to go away. And you could argue it actually never goes away. So some of the data show that it's a permanent hit. Some of the data show it takes them over a decade to recover. So I think that all those people are looking at a challenge, and I think the challenge is real. And I don't do magical thinking. I used to, but I gave it up years ago. So not everyone's going to come through this like roses, but in the same way that I think that you've designed your practice on successful people, I also have just concerned myself really with top performers. And so the question for me always is, how do you beat this? I mean, if the whole generation faces a 15% hit, then how do you become one of the people who not only survives but thrives?
Yeah, for sure. In one of your books titled Cracking the Hidden Job Market, How to Find an Opportunity in Any Economy, I think is a great time this is one of those economies. So what is the hidden economy?
Well, the hidden job market, the hidden economy, is all those jobs that change hands without going to somebody who applied for a posted opening. Now, I want to make that a distinction because it's a little bit subtle. I didn't say the position wasn't posted. I said the person hired did not respond to that posting. So all the jobs that change hands before they're posted are part of the hidden job market. But also the hidden job market is those jobs that go to people that ignored the posted opening. And so I always teach people, if you're really looking at the postings, that's already too late, because by the time something's made a posting, the need has been in the organization for a time. I had some old research that showed the need showed up as much as 9 months before the position requisition went into HR. So the magic window is that 9 months. So if you're always knocking on the door, you find people that are in that period of time, you find that opportunity before it's announced. And once it's announced, we know that according to one study, 383 people will apply. And there's other metrics that show many more than 1,000 will apply. In a bad economy, there's always many, many more applicants. So if you can avoid a position that's been announced in the first place, then your competition is usually quite smaller. It's between 7 and 11. So it's a very reasonable number of other people that they might even consider. And in many, many, many cases, if you approach them before it's announced, it's really you and only you that's under consideration. So the competition difference is massive. If you're unusual at all, like a young person with little experience, you can't afford to get into a stack of 500 resumes with people with 3 to 5 years of proven experience. But I do want to always stress that many of these jobs end up announced. They do end up with 500 applicants. But the fact of the matter is that companies don't want to wade through those 500 applicants. They don't trust the 500 applicants. The national lie rate, I did some research on this years ago, the national lie rate on resumes is around 25% for a management resume, and it goes way up in a recession. So people make up dates, they make up titles, they claim experiences and accomplishments that are unreal, and employers know this. So they're actually always favoring people that come in with an introduction and people that come in through the hidden job market, because those people are usually vetted. There's at least one human being who says, this person's not a liar. I know them. I went to school with them. I played racquetball with them. It doesn't matter what it is. But that vouching system is incredibly valuable to the organization at reducing the hiring of bad employees. So those are some of the reasons that candidates should look there, because it's easier and better, and organizations look there because they end up with a better hire.
I'm astonished by the lie rate. I must be a very gullible person. I do believe like there should be honor in a resume, and it crushes my spirit a little bit to think that people do actually make up so much stuff.
They make up, the main things they make up are dates, titles, educational accomplishments. Those are the things that they make up routinely, and also false salary claims. So, and the interesting thing about this is it's not that hard to verify most of those. Employers will, even employers that refuse to give references will verify dates of employment and the official title. And so in educational institutions will all verify a degree. You call the registrar's office, they call in to verify a degree, they put you through to some minion who looks it up and says, yes, this person did or did not graduate on that date. So unfortunately or weirdly, the liars, they can be caught, but they're still, they are perceiving, and perhaps accurately, that the chances of being caught are small, and the chances of having success using these techniques is high enough to take the risk. 25%. So if you got a stack of 100 resumes, 25, you might say liars, you could even say criminals, are in that list. And so HR is always trying to figure out how to reduce that.
That's a shocking statistic to me. I appreciate the idea of the hidden opportunity or the hidden economy. And I have to admit, I don't think I've ever applied for a job in my entire career. So have I tapped into the hidden economy by making that happen? Or is there a special like knock that you do it to be able to get in?
Well, I think you've tapped into the hidden economy very effectively your whole life. Many of the fast track people that I interviewed for my book, Who Gets Promoted, Who Doesn't, and Why, they were always creating their own next opportunity. So you probably have just always done this. It's probably part of your DNA. But I will stress that it doesn't have to be a part of somebody's DNA. You can actually learn this. And so in Cracking the Hidden Job Market, which is one of my books, I teach people these techniques. And then in my book, Who Gets Promoted, Who Doesn't, and Why, 12 Things You Better Know to Get Ahead. That book was actually named Career Management Book of the Year. And same thing, it's just went out, interviewed the most successful people I could find, and asked them for secret tips and compiled them in a book. I call it the 2-train ride read. You can read it in 2 train rides, and it can change what happens to you next in your organization.
So I just want to point out, we are connected because my son reads that book every 6 months.
Wow, that's great.
To make sure. And he's like, just like, what are you reading? He's, well, I'm reading this again. And I'm like, what do you mean again? And he goes, oh, I read it every 6 months to make sure that I'm promotable.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
One of my clients sent me a picture of her baby reading the book.
That's awesome. My baby probably can read. I assume this was a baby. That's great.
Yeah, I have a picture of it right here. Here's the baby reading the book.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That's awesome.
Sydney, Australia. There you go. Getting ahead.
So the hidden job market is something that you do teach in your book, but I'd say most commonly people do rely on job postings to figure out, in the meantime, kind of like that check that box, like I'm doing activity to be able to get the jobs. So where, what, where's the best place to find a posting that would be relevant to my skills? And how do you identify whether a job is good for you?
Okay, so I don't say you should never apply for a posted opening. I say that you should spend 25% or less of your time on posted openings. And I really ratchet that down all the time. I really think it should be less than 10% of your time. So 90% of your time should be in activities that cause you to talk to people that you're not talking about a posted opening. But I think Indeed is good, and LinkedIn in particular is good to find positions that you might be appropriate for and you might be interested in. There's really nothing wrong with any of the major job boards. There's nothing wrong with them. And they're actually very useful for a particular thing. You want to go find the jargon that people are using today and make sure that jargon's in your resume. So if your resume is got old language, and it doesn't mean that you're old, it may mean that your company uses old language. You may be a superstar, but you're still a victim of the experiences that you have had. And so you're couched in the environment of where you work, and they may be using language that's not cutting edge. And so, which, by the way, cutting edge is not cutting edge. So you use the position announcements to make sure that your language is up to date, au courant. A perfect example is, dorms. If you're applying for a position on a college campus and you use the word dorms, you're not going to get that position because the correct term is residence halls. So this is the language evolves constantly. Corporate language evolves very quickly. And those posted announcements allow you to have the latest jargon and stick it in your resume.
Yeah, actually, excellent advice. So, so that they can quickly look for the words that relate to the job as well. So
let me briefly cover how to get a posted opening and win that stack of 500 resumes. I don't have anything against looking in posted openings. It's just the success ratio is minuscule, okay, compared to these other techniques. But if you want a posted opening, read the announcement, take every noun out of it, and stick it in your resume. Because applicant tracking systems, they're not very smart, and they're very easy to fool. And so I teach MBAs, for example, how to do this. I teach executives how to do this. And I enforce a rule. I do not allow any candidate I'm working with to tell a lie. If you can't figure out a way to put that term in your resume without telling a lie, you're not creative enough to work at the executive level. So we're creative in taking ways, and you take the words, put them legitimately into your documents, and the applicant tracking system will identify you as someone to be advanced. So it's a game. It's an arms race. I enjoy it. It's kind of a game of logic. But that's how you get posted openings to ding on you.
Yep. And the applicant tracking system, the artificial intelligence that as a recruiter we can put into a system, it's a real thing. So that's a good technique you're teaching people to stuff their resume with in the right way.
And let me just say that I believe this is legitimate for the following reason. A database and an AI can never hire somebody. Only people can hire somebody. And only people can tell when they want to bend a rule. So maybe the requisition says fluent in Spanish, and I've got somebody that last took Spanish in high school, but everything else about them is great. And maybe they speak French, and maybe they speak Italian. But if we can get them to a human, the human can say, oh my goodness, this person knows Romance languages, they're really smart. This the Spanish part they can pick up. Look how beautiful they are in all the other categories. So only humans can tell when to break a rule. So what I'm trying to do always is not fool a human, but get to a human.
Excellent. One of the things that we coach our young emerging leaders to do is networking when they're looking for a career transition. And yet we're in this funky time frame where a lot of networking events aren't happening. What would you suggest to someone who is aggressively looking for a placement and to have a job? What should they be doing to tap into it?
Allison, I think young people in particular don't like the word networking.
I know.
It puts in their mind a bunch of old people drinking cocktails and being awkward and walking up to people that are strangers and trying to initiate interchanges with them. So I tend to just avoid the word networking and simply say your goal is to talk to people. So if you're trying to talk to people, you either have to ask for something or provide something. So if you're in a job search, asking for something, asking for help will get you a very, very, very long way. As long as in each of your reach outs, you have a disclaimer where you explicitly say, I'm not looking for an assignment with your group. I'm not trying to join your firm. I simply want your advice. And you have to mean it. Okay, so it's not a ploy. You have to mean that. Why? Because information is more valuable than anything else on this earth, on this planet. And so what you really want is someone in investment banking, not to hire you, but to tell you how to get hired in investment banking. Because that piece of information is teaching you to fish, and the other one's just giving you some fish. So that's a way of approaching people and asking for help. The way that people do this wrong, of course, is they really badger people. They come in under the guise of maybe asking from some questions for an informational interview, but what they're really trying to do is like trick that person into offering them a position. So that's the first step. That's going out and talking to people when you ask for something. But the other side of it is to offer something. So if you have anything of valuable to the people that are the type of people who could hire you, then you can offer that up and say that you want to share it with them. Nothing readily and quickly comes to mind, but maybe you did an economic study of Norwegian pharmaceutical companies. And you did this for an econ class as a senior in college. So just go find everybody that does any business whatsoever with Norwegian pharmaceutical companies and offer up your paper. I said, hey, I did this research project, earned an A, had a great presentation, won the case competition. I'd love to share this with you if you're interested at all. And so that's a way of also getting people to interact with you. If you offer them something or you ask for something, are the techniques. And I think sometimes we make this too complicated. You use email. I mean, it's still the best way to get someone to say yes or no. And one of the things you have to teach young people in particular is that the failure rate is normally more than 19 out of 20. So the success rate is less than 5%. So you have to teach somebody, what does that mean for a failure rate to be 95%? It means that out of 100 you send out, 5 people will respond at all. Maybe one of them will talk to you. But before you say that doesn't seem very productive, you have to remind people that making custom resumes and custom cover letters has also a less than 1% success ratio if you add up all of them that are floating around the internet. So it's a lot easier to send a quick email, a broadcast email, than it is to customize an application. And they don't like this failure rate. I will tell you, young people don't like it. And it's really what keeps them from persevering.
With so much time on their hands while we're in this kind of interesting job market, what are some of, I'm a big fan of learn a new skill and go online to do it. Do you have any platform or suggestions that people should be considering to hone their skills or improve their skills while they're in a job search mode that's affordable, I guess, I'll position it that way, free or affordable?
Yeah, I just did a workshop on this. So I don't have these at the tip of my tongue, though, because it was a big, long list of them. Yeah. Of course, LinkedIn Learning is free for job seekers for at least 30 days. And I think there's more than one way to get that extended past 30 days. There's Coursera and those others that are kind of obvious. And then there's the great courses, which are a little bit more in depth, almost like a college class, usually involving 30 one-half-hour sessions. So that's 15 hours of instruction. There's tons more in that way. I also have a list of quick MBAs. So what I probably should do, Allison, is text you those and let you just have them as an add-on to the end of this webinar if you want.
That would be fantastic. As a matter of fact, I will upload it and attach it as a downloadable so that people can have it. Thank you. That would be excellent.
I think it's really useful because people can pick up these skills using these platforms. And as you pointed out, they have the time to do it. And you don't have to be perfect. You just have to get to the final page.
So doing some, honing the skills. I know that going to college and or graduate school it's a huge financial commitment, and it's becoming a tougher decision for a lot of people. Do you have any advice on how much someone should spend on college?
Well, a lot more than people spend on college. I can tell you that for sure. I'm going to do very straightforward financial analysis. I think many decisions can be reduced to financial analysis, and this is one. So it's a kind of a standard number that a bachelor's degree is worth around $1 million more than a high school diploma. Now, there's a lot of controversy about these data. So for those of you who are viewers who are experts, I'm aware of the controversies, but I want to move forward. So instead of spending 30 minutes explaining what that means, let's just say it's around $1 million.
Okay.
Then people who complete a master's degree will earn $400,000 more than people that stop at a bachelor's degree. And people who complete the PhD do really well. They earn $1.4 million more than people who stop with a bachelor's degree. Now, each one of these data points includes opportunity cost. So if you think about it rationally, you should be willing to spend as much as $1 million in current equivalent dollars to buy your college education, and you should be willing to spend as much as $400,000 in current equivalent dollars to buy a master's degree, and you should be willing to spend over $1 million bucks. But I tell you, the weird thing about the PhD in particular is I can teach people how to get a PhD for free. I can teach people how to get paid to get a PhD. A little harder with the master's. So I think sometimes people look at the expense of baccalaureate degrees and they project the idea that it must cost an equivalent amount to get a master's or get a PhD, whereas that's simply not true. There's many ways to get a free master's and free PhD. So I have handouts on this, and a lot of this is covered in my book, Graduate Admissions Essays. But to answer your question, people should be willing to spend a great deal more. Now, there's a caution and a caveat here. That is, you have to look at the person's intentions and career path after they finish the degree program. If your intention is to be a poet and you get an expensive degree in MFA that you paid for, usually your family pays for these kinds of things, I'm going to guess that I don't know the numbers, but it's going to be less than 10% of people who go through this process will ever make very much money as a poet. But if your intention is to join a technology firm and be an administrator and a manager, an executive and a leader, then this will pay back massively. But an area where people make a mistake, and this is very, very interesting to me, an area where people make a mistake is the major. It turns out the major is not that big an indicator of your earnings. Philosophy majors out-earn business majors 10 to 20 years after graduation. And this information is not getting out there. So families are still obsessed. Oh, if you major in psychology, what are you going to do? Diagnose our cat? But in fact, psychology is one of the top 12 majors of CEOs. So I guess I'm trying to maybe that's more answer than you needed, Allison. I don't know.
No, you're leading. I think it's really critical for people to understand, because I think, even I'm going to, send this to my kids. Like, we have, our last is deciding to stop. And I'm like, it's really important that you continue. You've gone this far and just finish. So don't give up, because it could be upwards of $1 million difference. And I think that's significant. So I like that stat, even if it's not perfect. I think it's an eye opener for sure. It does lead me to the next question. So education is a critical pillar of, something I value. It's part of our mission. It's a big part of it. I don't know that I have a strong opinion. So I guess I want to ask you what your opinion would be. Does a prestigious university or a community college matter where you get your bachelor's from?
It depends on the student, okay? And it depends on their family upbringing. So I could lead you to data points that say both of these, okay? A tremendous amount of the research on the career outcomes of people who go to elite institutions is biased, incredibly, blatantly, visibly biased. One of my acquaintances is famous for saying if you took the graduating class of high school seniors that's going to go to Princeton, stuck them in a closet and kept them there for 4 years, bringing only meals, and then you let them back out, they're still going to be massively successful. So the fact that they went to Princeton, you have to establish a value added. Did Princeton help them more than they helped themselves? So, but there's a caveat to that, and that's this. There's a lot of acculturation that happens at elite institutions in particular, and all institutions with a rich culture. So let's compare two things, one with a rich culture and one not. If you go to a community college where people drive to class, park, run fast to the class, then spend their 50 minutes and then run back to their car and then drive home, that's no culture at all. The students don't interact with themselves, and certainly academically at all, outside of that, the class, the 50 minutes. And usually the faculty members doing all of the talking. So even that, you could argue, is not much acculturation. And then you compare that with a small liberal arts college where students are forced together, where they eat together, they dine together, they go to class together, they exercise together, and they sit around talking school and philosophy at 10 and 10:30 and 1:30 in the morning, and 3, these days 3 and 4 in the morning. There's a tremendous opportunity for a student to get access to other points of view. So if a student is, so that's acculturation. Now let's talk about the family background. If the student's family background is, I don't know how else to put this, very much top tier socioeconomic status, then they're carrying that status, that internalized worldview and experiences and language and use of English, they're carrying that with them. And so when they go to community college and then transfer to a more elite school, they didn't lose a thing because they're bringing the intangibles all the way along. However, if a student is very bright, but their family is not from that top socioeconomic status stratum, then they need that exposure and they're changed more by it. So that's a very long answer to what looks like a simple question, but it's not a simple question. It's a question with extraordinarily nuanced ramifications to the answer.
Okay. And you've provided some really good insights, and one that actually kind of addresses our youngest. You know, she's driving to class, doing the class, and leaving. You know,
she'll learn how to pass tests, but she's not going to learn how to navigate the world.
Yeah, super interesting. Although I think she's going to navigate just fine. I have no concerns whatsoever. She's
good.
But she's not. You know, she's and it's her choice. So parenting, you know, it's tough.
Yeah.
I also recognize that obviously, you know, college is not for everyone. And I coach a lot of people who are incredibly successful that have no degrees. But vocation in building technical skills is definitely a really viable option in today's world, for sure. What vocations do you see as being in the highest demand?
Well, let me talk about things that are not exportable, so they can't be outsourced. And also things that are a little bit less cyclical. And so the classic example is residential plumbing repair. So most residential plumbing repair is an emergency. It can't be put off. So it's not cyclical in the same way that construction is. Construction is very cyclical. So if you're in construction, you may do really well without diplomas. And when I say really well, I do mean the $75, $85, $95, $120,000 a year. So you may do that well, but you have to live through periods of boom and bust or move around the country a lot. So if you look at a residential plumbing repair, that's going to be steady. You live in your community, and that's going to be the same in good seasons and in bad seasons. You might occasionally have to lay someone off, but by and large, that's going to be very successful. An area that used to be a really good place for people that didn't want to go to college is anything that's based on sales and commission-based sales. The problem with that has become that the organizations are requiring a college degree to get these jobs. Now, do you need a college degree to do them? You could argue very successfully that you don't. but there's inflation in credentials in our society. And so sales is the fastest way to six figures with any degree, high school degree, college degree. The fastest way to get to six figures is, in fact, sales. So I also like things that need to be repaired that can't be delayed. The plumbing is one example. HVAC is another. Heating, ventilation, and air conditioning is another. But you need to be careful for rollovers in technology. For example, when electric cars come into place, we're going to need 1/nth the auto mechanics. Electric cars just don't need repaired. And when they do need repaired, they're modular. So you don't have to be a brilliant genius and figure out why that little clunk has to do with this modulator valve over here that you read about in a technical release 10 years ago. When it comes to electrical cars, it's going to be replace this, and that'll fix that. So you have to be a little bit careful of picking a blue collar career that's not going to go somewhere. And then the ultimate issue, and no one ever talks about this, but forgive me if I'm gonna, no one ever talks about a class. So if you get tremendously wealthy, sometimes doing something that doesn't require a college degree, and you want to be buddies with everybody that has a college degree, you're gonna have to work at it a little bit. You're gonna have to maybe take up some stuff that reveals class, such as sports, living in certain neighborhoods, sending your kids to certain kinds of experiences in order to rub shoulders with the people you want to rub shoulders with. So that's just something I would tell somebody thinking about this if they were 17, 18, or 19. And, a weak performer with a college degree is actually almost always surpassed by a strong performer with a trade. So, I'd like to see fewer people that go off to school that don't love it, don't like it, don't succeed at it, feel beaten up and basically, frankly, abused by that system when they could be doing something else that they love and are passionate about. There's tons of these examples. I'm sure you've seen them. People who wanted to design guitars or design fast motorcycles. They could be tremendously happy doing that and super miserable as a middle manager in a corporation.
I think it's a tough spotlight to put on it, but I think it's unfortunately very true. And I think that's you raised an excellent point. So I think the one thing that I hear a lot, especially in some of our younger generation, is having to write a resume. So could you just kind of provide some do's and don'ts, maybe even middle management and executive level management? Like what should we make sure our resume is packed with, other than customized words? And what I review a lot of resumes, they are not all created equal. How many pages should they be? And should any thought be given to format?
Okay, so for content, in particular for young people, their resume should not be concerned with whether they were paid for the experience they're reporting. So if you do something as a volunteer and you do something for pay, those can be mixed into the same section on a resume. And I think young people, they'll pick up a resume book for a manager and they'll get the wrong idea. So that thing they did at summer camp can be much more important for getting a job after college than the fact that they all last 3 summers have been a clerk in a hardware store. So mixing up things you were paid, unpaid, formal, informal, part-time, and full-time are one of the biggest tips I can give to young people. And a tip for all people, and this is really truly whether you're in high school trying to get a job at summer camp or whether you're a CEO trying to work your way onto a board, your top of your resume has to match your objective. So you don't have to have an objective, but your top of your resume has to match the objective that you actually have. So if you want to work in commercial real estate, the top of your resume has to start by talking about commercial real estate. And one of the skills that comes into creativity, I love creativity. I love resumes. I've written 3 books on how to write resumes, and I've personally written over 10,000 resumes. I love resumes. They're, to me, an example of poetry where there's structure, but within that structure, there's a tremendous opportunity for creativity. So I love to find a way to take the person's objective and get that top listing to focus on that objective. And you can do it with special projects, task forces, stuff that you did as a volunteer, anything that you can come up with. And I just did one for a football player at Tulane on commercial real estate, based upon one afternoon in New York City touring around with a second cousin who was in commercial real estate. The whole top third of his resume now is about commercial real estate in New York and his tour through this. And we just called it Site Experience. It was a shadowy experience, but I wanted to kind of blur the waters a little bit. So we just called it a Site Experience. And that's how you get the top of the resume to match the target. There's other ways to do it, but whether you're a freshman in college or whether you're a middle manager or senior person, that rule is pretty, you want to go do everything you can to fulfill that rule. So the next question you had was about pages. I don't mind if a resume is long, but you got to realize that I don't work with a lot of high school students, a lot of college students. There is a long-standing rule up through the MBA that one version of your resume has to be one page. And that rule, anytime there's a rule, follow it. That's not a mystery. You don't have to go home and say, well, should I have a one-page resume? Yeah, of course, because it's the rule. So after you have that one-page resume for the rule, you can have another resume that's longer that you feel might represent your skills and abilities and accomplishments better, but certainly comply with the rule. What are your thoughts, Allison? You clearly have a position on this, so why don't you tell us all?
I do agree that the objective should meet the position you're applying for. If the first paragraph, the top third of it does not correlate back to the job I'm hiring for, I don't even consider it.
You're not going to read any more, right?
No, it's just that obviously this is not a good fit, right? Or no thought was given to it. I do believe it should be one full page, even if you're doing unpaid things. Anything less than you've not given it enough thought to sell yourself. And I would say it shouldn't be more than 3 pages. I appreciate visual resumes. When it does not look good, I do judge.
Yeah, of course you do. I talked to a guy that was a CEO in Silicon Valley, and we were on a plane together. And he said he holds them out about this far, about the full length of his arm. And he says, if I don't like the way it looks, I don't read the first line. And so that was, yeah, I know. I can tell whether something looks good from that distance, and he didn't bother to read it if it did.
Yeah, that's super interesting. You brought up assisting a young man from New York. I'm a New Englander originally, and I'm now on the Pacific Northwest, so I'm on the West Coast. There's differences between the East Coast and the West Coast. Can you give, I have listeners all over the country, so could you give some guidance as to if you're applying for a job on the West Coast, like things that people should consider in translation if they're thinking about different coasts?
I love this question. And you know, what's funny is that you're like one of the only people I've ever met that knows this. So that's cool in and of itself. So on the East Coast, you put your prep school and you leave it on all the way through being an executive. If you didn't go to a prep school, you leave it off. But if you did, you list it. You just, Exeter, the date, you don't say anymore. But on the West Coast, that's considered, what's the right word? I don't know.
Pompous?
Yeah. It's like childish, actually, like you didn't grow up. But here's one you may not know is that in New Orleans, you put your high school. So everybody that grew up in New Orleans, if you meet them, they will tell you the high school that they went to. And they do this all the way through being bank president. So you never escape your high school in New Orleans. So in New York, of course, you do, but also oddly in this pocket of New Orleans, but on the West Coast, you don't. And so I think that's an important difference. There's probably some language differences, but I have to see it. Some things would be grating in New York, but you can brag your butt off in Silicon Valley. So you might change a couple of words on an accomplishment claim. So those are some that I know about between the two coasts. What are your thoughts?
It's funny. I am almost embarrassed to say it, but I attended a preparatory school, and it was like, do you keep it on? Do you keep it off? And I I have never needed to give out my resume, but it's on there because I'm an East Coast girl. Like that's what you do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Just leave it on there.
But I don't share that story ever because it does
Yeah.
very, I don't know. It's a different culture for sure because people don't
Yeah.
go to preparatory school here, and that's okay.
Yeah, there are differences. For one other difference, and I'm sure you do know this, is that finance people on the East Coast, even people that are making $2 or $3 million a year, they still have a one-page version of their resume. They never let go of that MBA concept. So, of course, they have another one that may be 5 pages long, but they still have one that's 1 page long.
Just out of curiosity, in any of your books or your resources, do you share great examples of what a resume should look like?
I do. Well, I've written 3 books on how to write a resume. None of them are current, so I wouldn't send anyone to them. But I actually have an example in Greek of what an attractive looking job description is, followed by the scope, followed by the accomplishments. And I do it in Greek just to prove that the design really matters. So I think of it as poetry. I used to be a poet back in the day. And so your poem not only has to sound good, it has to look good. And so you don't have a long line followed by a short line. It has to look good on the page. And so the same thing applies to resumes. And we'll go out of our way to make sure that it looks good on the page. So that's one thing. But now you can have a great deal of other design features. So there's a kind of a breakout in design on resumes right now. You can have, I would just call it design features in the same way that when you're doing PowerPoint, you can reach over into the right and ask for design suggestions. So I'm seeing a lot more resumes with creative stuff in it, like my attention bar. And so it may have a circle, and then, so here's family, and here's my job, and here's tennis. Here's something else I care about, antique sewing machines. And I find these interesting. I don't think that they replace the importance of content itself, but there's a wider acceptance now of employing authorities for these types of resumes, and they are more fun to look at. They do play hell, though, with applicant tracking systems and character readers. So if you're going to have your resume fed into one of those, not physically, but electronically, it confuses them because there's no one solid left margin. So you need to think about that. If you're using your resume only with humans, then some of these design elements are fun. My personal brand is X. I like that stuff. But if you're going to end up in a database, they may not be able to take your listings and turn them into anything more than gibberish for the applicant tracking system.
Okay, that's fair. I'm not sure if you are familiar with personality type assessments like DISC and the Myers-Briggs and Strengths Finders. Is that something that a candidate should share on their resume, or is that completely that could be bad because they'll judge or evaluate you based on their own maybe lack of knowledge on the tools?
I think they have value, in particular, StrengthsQuest. Some of them are not scientific, and the ones that are not scientific, they'll work with someone else that likes that one, but with people who care about such things, you'll come across as naive maybe, or maybe unschooled. So Myers-Briggs, there's people that love Myers-Briggs and will fight to the floor about how important it is, and then other people will say, well, it was never based on science. Not only was it not based on any science recently, but it was never based on science. So I don't know. I would be a little bit careful. StrengthsQuest based on science, Myers-Briggs not. Enneagram, I don't know. I haven't really looked into it, but I think it's more of a.
It's not based on science.
I like purple, therefore I'm a purple person, and that means these things. I'm being a little bit dismissive and probably shouldn't be, but I would be somewhat judicious in listing my types.
Okay, all right. I think that's great advice. Have you written any specific articles that you'd like to recommend to those who are currently looking for their next career move right now?
Well, I would tell them to get Cracking the Hidden Job Market, my book, because I took everything I know about the hidden job market and stuck it in that book. And the interesting thing about the structure of it, it starts out with stuff that's relatively commonly known and gets into more exotic techniques as you go deeper into the book. I did that because I wanted to reward the people that keep going. And I also didn't want to give big secrets away to people who couldn't get past page 50. So I would recommend Cracking the Hidden Job Market. For young people who don't know what they want to do, then I would recommend my book, How to Get Any Job, Life Launch and Relaunch for Everyone Under 30, which is exactly what it promises. You're either in college or you've been out a while and you're not quite sure how things are going. I would look at that book. So if I were looking at career change right now, I would look at those two.
Okay, fantastic. One of the things that I have had a lot of conversations about is doing a pivot, a career pivot, right? Or relaunching a new you, however you want to look at it. And I have a general rule of thumb. I'd say like every decade, there is probably some type of pivot that people should be making, would be common that people are making. Is that typical or standard, or is it more often?
It's going to vary by the person. So it's true that people are having a lot of jobs, but it's often not driven by the person's choice. They're getting laid off. And we're at the beginning. I like to say where we're at today is that we're at the beginning of a historic change. And I used to say that we were in the second out of the first inning. I still believe we're still in the first inning of what's going on right now. And so I think that we're going to see layoffs in the next 20 months that are massive. And if you study economics, layoffs create recessions, not the other way around. The recession comes once the layoffs come. And so the layoffs are going to create a deep recession. Frankly, it's going to be a depression. The difference between a recession and a depression is whether it's wide scale and sharp. And so this is definitely going to be a depression, a word that was used frequently prior to the Great Depression when the word was retired. But anyway, this is what we're headed into. So I think people are not going to just face a routine pivot. I think they're going to face a career crisis, and they're going to have to redesign themselves to succeed. And anything like this accelerates trends that were already underway. If you don't visibly create value, you're going to find it hard to create a career path that goes forward. I used to tell young people, if I have to tell you what to do, I don't need you. So you got to come to me, and you got to come to me and tell me what you're going to do to make my life better, or I don't need you. And that's replicated throughout the economy. So I'm not sure I'm actually answering your question, but I think that people are going to have to retool on their own. And this is, of course, what's covered in Who Gets Promoted, because I'm talking about who is the high value people inside an organization, keeps being high value enough to be promoted over and over again. And those people can replicate themselves, and they're often autodidacts. They teach themselves what they need to learn, but they're also prescient. They stay ahead of the curve. And in the book, I recount a very short story about a guy. His boss came to him and said, "You need to learn Spanish." And he said, "Well, I don't need to learn Spanish. I'm an American." He said, "Well, change is coming. You need to learn Spanish. They'd really love for you to learn Spanish." So the guy refused to learn Spanish. They laid off his whole team and hired only people that spoke Spanish. His boss was trying to save his career, and instead of responding to that, he went a different direction. He went an obstinate, I don't have to do that direction. But see, the people that create value and sustain value, they wouldn't need their boss to tell them that. They would see that, and they would respond to that horizon before anyone else. And whatever your politics may be, the guy messed up his career path because he refused to learn something that his boss told him to learn. And so the people that create value and keep being valuable and keep finding success, they know what they need to learn and learn it before they have competition. And I saw this in the Silicon Valley. In the Silicon Valley, wave after wave of cowboy programmers came through. And these were people that could teach themselves. And about 6 years later, every college student in America was studying what they learned 6 years ago, and then their value dropped to nothing. So they were making six figures. They didn't need a degree. No one cared where they were from. And then every 4 years or so, they'd get fired. So they had to do this over and over and over. But while they were ahead of the curve, they were deep into six figures. And so the whole world works that way now.
It really does. So I'd say the key takeaway is get the book for sure. If you're wanting to make sure that you are relevant in the role that you're in with the company that you're with right now and looking for progression, that you get the Who Gets Promoted and Why. What is the title? Help me.
Who Gets Promoted, Who Doesn't, and Why.
And Who Doesn't and Why. Okay, thank you. That's a great read. And honestly, everyone should read it because we should all be looking for the potential future needs so that we're staying sharp and valuable for our organizations.
Allison, I'd like to talk about something if I could. I know that we don't have a ton of time left.
That is exactly where we're going. What did I not think to ask? Please share.
Well, I want to talk about a couple things. One of them is salary negotiations, and another is how you close a job offer right now. And so they're very much interrelated, and I've been doing quite a bit of work on both of these lately. So if you don't mind, I think it's an urgent need for your viewers and your wide range of leadership and thought leaders. So salary negotiations is important for reasons that people underestimate. Not only does it make a huge difference in your own income, so I can show you tons of graphs, but it tends to come out between $700,000 and $1.4 million if you do or don't negotiate for salary. So that's a lot of money to leave on the table just because you don't want to negotiate for salary. The other thing that I want to say is that if you don't negotiate for salary, you lose more than money. There's a phenomenon that happens. There's a psychological response of the employer when you don't negotiate for salary. They actually perceive they maybe have made a mistake in trying to hire you, and they resort their assessment of your value and your skill set, all because you didn't negotiate for salary. And so I'm trying to teach, I'm working right now with an international coalition of PhDs. And so there's a lot of PhDs. I have a PhD. I'm outgoing and extroverted, but the overwhelming majority of PhDs are somewhat introverted. And so I'm teaching them how to negotiate for salary. And one of the things I tell them is this is a ritual. It's a business ritual. You're supposed to do certain things. That's how rituals work. And when you don't do them, you're disturbing the equilibrium of the universe. When you don't do your part, you're messing things up. And so we teach them the lines to say and how to say them to go ahead and negotiate for salary, not aggressively. We're not trying to make them into bloodthirsty negotiators, but I always teach win-win techniques. But this is something that people need to learn to do. It's not hard to learn to do, and it is a contributor to the gender-based wage gap. Women who negotiate for salary are equally successful. I've got numerous research projects, some of which show one side, some of which show the other, but the general consensus is that they're equally successful as men who negotiate. They simply negotiate a lower incidence. And so if we could get more women to negotiate for salary, it would go somewhat toward reducing the gender-based wage gap, which is a true societal problem, which we should all work on and all get rid of as managers and owners equally, as well as young women entering the marketplace. But there's a really good technique for women that are negotiating for salary, and that's to negotiate on behalf of someone else. Either for all the women in their MBA class is a really good one, for their family. So I'll try to model this. I can't see it on my computer right now, and I may mess it up. I'm going to take a shot at it. Okay. It makes me nervous to negotiate for salary, but I've done the reading, and there's a tremendous cause for the gender-based wage gap is, in fact, negotiating for salary. So, and I want to address that societal problem and make sure, of course, that your organization doesn't contribute to that either. You don't want to be a contributor to that problem either. So would you give me the same base that you would give a man who negotiated hard for the maximum? What would that maximum look like? So you're not negotiating for yourself. You're negotiating for all women and society itself. It's a subtle technique, and I'm working on a book on this right now. So I want all of your viewers to negotiate for salary, to learn how to do it correctly. Never use ultimatums, use win-win techniques. And so I think I'll go forward here on my next point, and then we can come back to this if you have some commentary about it. I actually know one guy who was fired before he was hired because he did not negotiate for his own salary. Now, I know the CEO, and so I probably shouldn't name the company, but it's a major outplacement company. I'm sure it's one you're familiar with. And she was hiring a chief of procurement global. And so they get to the final stages of hiring. This is like 5 interviews, right?
Procurement, that's funny.
I know, chief of procurement global. And so he said, what's the salary going to be? And she named a number. And he said, well, that seems fine.
Right.
And so she immediately unhired him because he didn't negotiate for salary. If he's not going to negotiate for himself, what's he going to do for them all over the world, negotiating leases and equipment and supplies and materials? So I love that story because it's so crystalline clear.
It really is.
Yeah, I mean, it was the final meeting. And she said, well, there's some other things we got to look at. She backed out right then, right there. Next, I want to talk about, if I could, the final stumbling block for hiring right now. And I'm seeing this at the executive level and also the post-college level. So this stumbling block is, here's what's happening. People are getting interviews. People know how to do Zoom interviews. They've known for years, and they're just doing them all that way now. They know how to make a selection of somebody. You know, we like this guy, and we're going to bring her on or bring that man on. But here's where the stumble is. They can't figure out how to hire that person and bring them on board. So the part of hiring that stumbles, or that the blockade is at, where the decision comes to a stop, the bottleneck is the company cannot see how to bring on that employee successfully where they're productive and acculturated and a member of the team. So what I'm working with people to do now is that when they get near the end of hiring and they're starting to hear those words like, well, we think you would be a good addition, and there's verbal cues that it's going well, I'm teaching them to put in front of that company a plan for their own onboarding, where they solve the problem before the company stumbles over it. So you literally would make a memo that says, I know in these times, onboarding can be challenging. So I've designed an onboarding program of things I'd like to do. If you don't mind, I'll just share it with you, and then you share it with them. And it has features in it to create in a virtual world where you're never physically in the same place, onboarding and acculturation, which is extraordinarily important. And you provide that memo to the hiring authority, and they're like, oh, that does solve this problem I was about to have that was going to cause me to think, well, we'll just wait. Companies will run into the point that they can't wait, but right now they're all waiting. They're like saying, well, I'll just wait 3 months. We'll know more in 3 months. And then your candidate doesn't get a job. So the things that are on this onboarding are the obvious stuff, which is like you would have one-on-ones with everybody on your team and all matrix points, but also that you need to assign 4 buddies or ambassadors to the company that are not in the reporting structure of the employee to help that employee get background information on the company. And then you design a series of social events where the onboarding employee finds something in common with the people that they're going to interact with and gets an opportunity to do that, whether it's play chess virtually, go to a cocktail party virtually, it doesn't matter. But this is the kind of stuff that goes into this document, and that document is solving the problem. So a lot of candidates, instead of stumbling over that, solve it.
Are you suggesting drafting the onboarding memo to be a comprehensive onboarding plan, or just to overcome the hurdle of the uncertainty side of things that I would suggest I do to acclimate and become part of the team when the team may not even be in the office together, that kind of thing?
I'm suggesting that it's a real onboarding plan with details, and you simply say, you know, you don't have to use this, of course, but I just worked this up. looked up some resources online, came up with this. If it's useful to you, great. Don't force it on them, but it solves that problem that's causing employers to say, well, we'll wait 90 days.
Okay. Yeah. Super proactive. I think that I would probably fall out of my chair if I got one from a candidate. Like, whoa, very proactive. So excellent tool and suggestion to kind of be top notch and strategic, forward thinking, right? Good. That's awesome. Were those the two topics that you were hoping to additionally address?
Yes.
I very much appreciate your script regarding salary negotiations. I think that that would be, I hope, the number one takeaway for anyone who's listening who may be in any type of negotiation. You should always negotiate, always.
Yeah, if you use win-win techniques, there's zero downside. I mean, there's zero downside unless you're doing something dumb.
Right. Oh, awesome. I just can't thank you enough for your time today, Donald. And I do want to make sure that as we wrap up this interview, is there a preferred site or location for people to follow you on any of your articles that you're reading or materials that you provide?
I have a website. I don't use it to push out either marketing or information, but I have two features on it that I think are particularly pertinent. So it's super easy. It's www.donaldasher.com. So it doesn't get any easier than that. donaldasher.com. And the two features that I would recommend to all your viewers, one of them is salary negotiations. On my banner, there's a little button that says salary negotiations, and it walks through it both theoretically and practically. So you're going to learn the theory behind the practice and then the words that you use to win. So there's that. And then I have a little device that's the last chapter out of one of my books. Anyway, it's called Career Repair. So if your career is damaged, then go read Career Repair. It'll take you 5 minutes. It'll give you a reoriented way to look at what's going on with you and a strategy to achieve to your current desires and get back where you belong. So people who need career repair are often stay-at-home moms and dads. They may have been home 4, 5, 8 years, and they want to go back to work, but not at the bottom. And so, and I always like this, ex-prisoners. So anytime you have a category that has like moms and prisoners, I love categories like that. But if you're an ex-prisoner, you want to come back into society, you might look at career repair. And then there's people who have been laid off and have faced tremendous retrograde career, not advancement, but devolvement. So those are 3 examples of people who would benefit from that chapter. And everybody that's going to make a transition can benefit from the salary negotiations button.
Fantastic. Donald, thank you so much for your insight, your expertise, and your dedication to helping people find their path in their career. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Allison, for all that you do, and keep shining a light.
Thank you. Okay, take care.